I mean, even the professors knew it. They told me, they're like, hey, 80% of our College of Natural Resources is going to be wildlife students.
Right.
So they said, hey, in 4 years, once you graduate from here, you have to compete with 80% of your graduating class that's coming out of this college. Like, how does that sound to you?
In this day, there is a lot of passion around nature and the land. But I think we all have a similar question of how we are supposed to direct that passion. In this podcast, I try to get people reconnected to the land and better understand what our role as a species is on it. I do this through having conversations with people who I believe can offer information and ideas to better help us understand our role. So
you've been at the show for a couple hours now. What do y'all learn here?
What did I learn? The only people I stopped by were seed companies, because I wanted to see, there's just so many different food plot seed companies, and they all kind of just sell relatively the same kind of stuff with slight seed variations in the mixes. It's kind of just fascinating to me, seeing that, where it's they kind of all say that they're selling this magic mix or something that's going to make you grow a big deer and stuff, but they're pretty similar overall. And it's I just find that interesting, We
had one landowner stop in and say that he was looking at planting a solid stand of switchgrass, and he's like, a different guy down the road here told me that Big Blue stands up better than switchgrass in the winter. And I'm like, no, that's a complete lie. There's not even it's not even close.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, if you want to put some Big Blue stem in there, that's great. But at this point, warm season grass is a grass. It's not, there's not like deer like Big Blue stem. It's not like that's gonna bring in deer more than switches. Come on. To be completely honest with you, I think it probably works worse than switchgrass.
I will say, you will see differences, not necessarily in the deer's response to it, but just Big Blue stem is a lot more noticeable, insects and stuff, and that whole world. There is a difference between Big Blue stem and switchgrass in that world.
Yep.
And that's where you hear people knack at the seed mixes of it's got switchgrass, Big Blue, Indian in it, and it's a diverse screening, and they're like, but it's just grass. And it's to the deer it's no different, but there is a difference for
the grass itself is different, but like you said, from a side cover perspective,
it's not
there. Then there's no browse on either of them, really. I mean, maybe when it's early, when it's young, they might eat on it a little bit.
It depends, the area and the region you're in. I feel for that.
But from what the conversation that they were having was for side cover, and I'm like, no, switchgrass will always be better. And some people just hate switchgrass because it gets a bad name because wildlife guys use it. They overuse it, right?
Right.
But the reality is switchgrass. A deer can get underneath that switchgrass, and you have a little thermal cover. There's that close. Anyways, but yeah, no, like I said,
I think I just don't like the way that it's typically used in the industry in a monocultural fashion, for massive bedding areas, and they plant it they're planting a screening. And then it's just super, super thick switchgrass. It's they're not really going to use that for bedding when it's this thick wall,
right?
And it's and if you're trying to plant something for bedding, I can understand, the property you showed me last year, you planted a lot of switchgrass instead of prairie to cut costs, but you also didn't plant it super thick.
Correct.
And you let it open up. You let some weeds come.
3 pounds per acre. Yep.
Yeah, weeds come through, the blue vervain. There's a bunch of other stuff growing in there. And it's there's ways of doing it that's really awesome. So it's I knack on it not because of the grass itself, but in the way that it's typically used.
100%.
Because even I see it now, guys are using it to almost banking on deer not being in there. They'll plant it that thick so that deer aren't in there, so it improves their access, because they're not going to be pushing deer out. And I'm depending on the size of the acreage, you're dedicating that much land space for nothing. You're purposely making it desolate.
Right.
And that just doesn't really sit well with me. You know, it's why not just put in a 10-yard wide screening instead,
Yeah.
But yeah. Cool. Well, anyway, I'm here with 3 guys from Ideal Land Management. Brian's back. He's the actual owner and founder of it, and he's been on the podcast twice. The first time was at this expo, the Wisconsin Sportsman's Expo. But then I'm also here with Bo.
Yep.
Who's their newest add-on, right?
Indeed, I am.
Okay. And Jeff, who's been here for a while, right?
5 years. Chief operator.
Okay. 5 years, 6?
Yeah.
6 years, and he's the chief operator. Okay.
I suppose, yeah. I am the chief operator now as of today.
He's the chief operator at Ideal Land Management. He's in charge of servicing all our machinery. He's our head forestry mower.
Head forestry mower.
And yeah,
So how come when I call you, you're doing forestry mowing then?
I'm faking it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just has
It's like every time I call you,
in the
it's like
background to make it seem like he's doing something.
Well, no, the one time I did call you and you were forestry mowing, I didn't hear anything. So maybe you were faking it. But anyway, I was supposed to just interview Brian, but now he has introduced me to Bo and Jeff. And in particular, I'm going to be interviewing those two today. But Brian's going to be here to carry the conversation when it dies out between the three of us. No, I'm kidding. But why don't we start with you, Bo?
All right.
Give us a synopsis of, like, you're new into the industry, right?
Yep.
So what was, like, the transition between graduating from college and going into mostly, like, government-type jobs and then kind of transitioning into the private sector? Kind of, like, take us through the mindsets and what was going through your mind when you were doing that.
Yeah. I mean, to even back up a little bit further from that, when I was getting into college back in around 2020, COVID era, obviously, the biggest thing was I was trying to find the right career path for myself that would set me up for success.
Right.
And so when I looked at the grand gamut of everything, and I took a visit to UW Stevens Point, that's where I ended up going. I really wanted to get into the wildlife side of things, but when I went there, I mean, even the professors knew it. They told me, they're like, hey, 80% of our College of Natural Resources is going to be wildlife students.
Right.
So they said, hey, in 4 years, once you graduate from here, you have to compete with 80% of your graduating class that's coming out of this college. Like, how does that sound to you?
It's interesting because, like, there's more people than there ever has been going for just wildlife related degrees, whether it's like forestry, natural resources management, wildlife ecology. But there's less and less funding going to, like, the DNR, USDA, those sorts of programs, like just conservation related programs, which means there's less and less government jobs
for sure
available. And it's like, it's just tricky, but keep going.
Yeah. So I was really kind of looking at it, and I got into conversation with one of the professors. Mike Demchek was his name. And just talking with him, he was a forestry professor.
Right.
And his whole mindset was that all of our wildlife in Wisconsin at some point in their life utilizes the woodlands.
Right.
And so it kind of sparked this interest in my brain that I really thought about after visiting there, of like, okay, so if I go for forestry, I can make a difference in the forestry industry, but actually be favoring the wildlife side of things.
Right.
And so when it comes to forestry, there's always this two sides of a spectrum of forest management and like boards and cords of like logging and that operation. And then there's the wildlife side of thing of like producing grouse habitat and deer habitat and all of that stuff. And so I essentially took forest management is what I got my bachelor's in.
Okay.
And so I used that to essentially be the backdoor route to wildlife management, because all of our wildlife here in Wisconsin at some point in their life does use the woodlands. And so I started using that kind of as my MO of like why I'm going through college. And like I started going through forest management, but I wanted to have that emphasis in wildlife ecology. And so
I had a conversation with someone at a career fair up at Michigan Tech who was like a forester. And it was like me and 3 of my other buddies that were wildlife ecology students. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, but a good forester is going to look at it from like the whole perspective of like trying to manage boards per foot, but also the wildlife habitat of it. And I was like, at this like bachelor's degree level, should there really be a difference between like a wildlife ecology student and a forestry student, aside from like 4 or 5 classes that are going to teach you how to manage for, timber value? And he was like, well, yes, but that's a good forester. And I was like, isn't that what I just said? And also like, isn't that what we should be trying to do? But
yeah. I mean, you get the whole gamut of people.
Yeah.
I mean, I had people in my classes that were there because they wanted to do like logging operations and like they had a family history of it, or they knew people in the their local community that like they could get jobs with and stuff like that.
Sure.
So that's why they went there. I went for it, for that backdoor route of it, trying to get into wildlife ecology. So then setting me up, then coming out of college, I mean, I probably did 11, 12 interviews with a bunch of different organizations and companies trying to get a job in this industry. And it was a pretty cutthroat market. I mean, there was people out there. It was super hard to get the job. I mean, I would get through to the interviews.
And what year was this that you were trying to go?
I started my senior year, fall semester. So 2023, the fall of 2023, I was going through this. And I would be getting interviews. UW Stevens Point does a great job of setting you up to have realistic hands-on experience while you're in college. And that's what a lot of these employers were looking for. The textbook only gets you so far, and then that field experience is really what carries you to the end.
Yeah.
And so they set you up great for that. And so I would get all these interviews and I would just keep finishing second and third and all this stuff. And I just kept getting down on myself. And then I ended up applying for a joint position, Golden Sands RC&D and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yeah.
The position was a habitat restoration technician. And so I was like, well, this is a great way for me to use my degree. I can manage and do oak savanna restoration around the state. I can do prairie restoration around the state. It seems like a great gig.
Yeah.
Applied for it, interviewed, thought the interview went super well. Turns out it must have. As I got a second round interview, the head biologist ended up calling me, asked me some rather interesting questions than what you would think in terms of
are you allowed to talk about those questions?
I can. So he called me and he goes, hey, so I got a couple follow-up questions for you. He goes, is prairie habitat good deer habitat?
Oh,
and I was like, this is right up my alley, man. I mean, I'm a big deer hunter and stuff, and I was like, heck yeah, man. And I just dove into it, of how the springtime and the forbs and how that provides all that protein and rebuilds their body and their rack and all that stuff. And I mean, he must have loved the answer because inevitably I got the job out of it. And so navigating that whole federal side was just a whole different gamut of things. I mean, you got red tape to follow and you got to kind of stick to these guidelines and, you're out there to benefit trust species like the monarch butterfly and stuff like that.
Right.
So, and not really focusing on deer, which is what I wanted to focus on, which was kind of a different task for me. So it was a little complicated.
It's like we were talking earlier. It's a way of just getting people into the door.
Yep. 100%.
When you preach about prairie and stuff, it's because I do that a lot, on this podcast, especially for deer management. And I get kind of frustrated with the same kind of pushback questions people have of, oh, well, it's a summertime food source.
Right.
And I don't need summertime food sources. I just want stuff in the fall.
Right. I don't care if the deer are there during the summer. I want them there in the fall.
And that sort of concept to me, I don't really like. And then also people don't like it because it's a multi-year process.
Yeah.
We have some prairie planted on our property. We just planted it this past year and it was nothing this year. It was just all foxtail. But we grazed it in the fall to push back the cool season species. We're going to graze it again this spring and it's going to come up in a nice prairie this year.
Right.
It's going to get even better in the third year and then the fourth year. And you kind of do have to have that long-term mindset.
Yep.
And I feel like just in the whitetail industry, it's kind of hard to find that. It's growing. And that's what I like about Ideal Land Management is because you guys help landowners to kind of start to see that.
Yeah, 100%.
And I don't know, Jeff, you could probably talk a little bit more about, kind of trying to get landowners to think more long-term and stuff and how you guys kind of go approaching
this is terrible
that.
Going from Bo to me. He's a lot more well-spoken than I am. I sit in the machine by myself all day.
If you want to feel better about yourself, just go and listen to like my first 20, 30 episodes and you're going to feel a lot better about yourself.
Good. Take it.
So like getting landowners to think long-term can kind of be
A real pain. Not a pain, but they like that instant, like, do it this year,
Yeah.
see it this year sort of thing. And
that's what they're sold a lot too.
right, a lot.
You know,
like you're saying, like your prairie and stuff, ignore it. Don't
Right.
ignore it, but like don't expect to see it
yeah.
right now or even the year after.
Yeah. But it's kind of hard because like prairie it's such a cool thing. Like when you hear about it and you read about it, and even I've spent a lot of time looking at other people's prairies, and I kind of get a little envious sometimes because I'm
Right.
like, damn it, I want that. And it's like when you do have to just sit there and be patient about it, it's really hard. And I struggle with trying to get people to kind of think, you know, long term, and even with forest management and stuff like that. Like prairies, compared to forest management, prairie is a pretty fast thing. You know, if you want to get stems per acre in the woods, that's quick. But if you're trying to reshape your property, like you were talking about oak savanna, like that's an even longer process to do, and an even more like labor intensive, and oftentimes more expensive too. So it's yeah.
Oak savanna is definitely where you start seeing the dollar bills start adding up to each other. In the grand scheme of things, I mean, it's definitely well worth it in the end. I mean, if you think in the grand scheme of time, right, this is where these animals used to live historically.
Right.
And a lot of people make the argument of like, oh, this was before the deer population really took off to a boom. And now the agricultural side is what made that boom happen. And now we're kind of at that population because of the agricultural boom that happened.
And the lack of buffalo and elk on the landscape as well.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more there's a lot less competition, I should say.
Yep. There's more
food.
room for the grazing to occur on the landscape. But now, I mean, you kind of look at it, at least I look at it perspective of if you could match these two, you know, an oak savanna with agricultural fields, which is what you see in a lot of like the big driftless part of the state, right? The southwest part of that state. That's where you commonly found these things. Now you could start not only benefiting the wildlife in terms of just like, or the ecosystem in terms of doing some restoration and putting these ecological systems back onto the landscape.
Right.
Now you can start mixing and matching and starting to creating some good deer habitat, because now you have bedding areas and subtle food sources right next to your major food source, and that creates a really good opportunity for your deer hunters and stuff like that. And so you can almost use them to manipulate the landscape in a way that benefits you as the hunter.
Right.
And that's what we try and do here at Ideal Land Management, is try and implement these systems so that way it benefits the owner or the landowner that's trying to hunt these, just to make it a better system and try and set people up for success while also benefiting the ecological system at the same time.
I think I've tried to explain to people of, you're just trying to restore systems, right?
Yep.
And when you kind of start to put things back into place, like little minor things back into place, whether it's prairie or maybe you're going to do like a managed grazing system with cattle and stuff to kind of mimic what buffalo used to do, you start to see like subtle changes on the landscape that you wouldn't have otherwise. And a lot of times those things aren't necessarily noticeable, but sometimes they are. Like watching places where managed grazing is happening, where it's traditionally cool season pasture of like timothy, clover, alfalfa, orchard grass, you start to see a lot of those warm season prairie grasses come back, and those prairie forbs come back from the seed bank just because you started to reintroduce that grazing aspect to the landscape. And I think, you know, it's kind of, it's hard to say that to deer hunters, because that's something where it's like, you're basically saying like, I know this is going to be good, but I don't entirely know how it is going to be good.
Right.
You know,
100%.
And those can be like difficult conversations to have sometimes, but slow changes. But yeah, I think mindset is just a really like important thing when it comes to land management. And it's something that I think, you know, when you buy a piece of property, you have to work into your mindset with it. When you first buy a property, you're super excited and you want to get to stuff like now, and you want to start to see results now. And then you own it for a couple of years and you do all those things and you're like, oh, I didn't see like a huge change. So now you're starting to open up your mind to, maybe I have to put more time and effort into this to really make it something that's super cool. You know? So
and I mean, going back on what you guys were talking about with prairie there, I mean, at Fish and Wildlife, when we were doing those restorations, we would constantly be reminding people it runs on a 3-year cycle. That first year it sleeps, and you'd get these few species, what I always called hope species. Black-eyed Susans were commonly in the mix.
Partridge pea.
Yeah, partridge pea. Some other handful of species in there, maybe 5 to 8 species that you might see come up that first year. That just tells us as the project manager that like though their planting took, those seeds made it to the ground. And then when you move forward into that second year, it starts to creep a little bit. You start to see them maybe a little bit more. Some of them grasses start popping up. You see some big blue stem, little blue, switchgrass, some more forbs, whatever it is.
Right.
And that third year it really leaps and starts to take off. And that's where you really start to kind of acknowledge, like, okay, what I did was great. It's starting to take off. This is exactly what I expected. But yeah, people got to kind of have that patient mindset with it, and everyone this day and age loves to see instant results. And so you just got to remind people that this is going to happen. It's going to be a little slower.
That's also
process.
what people are fed too, It's like Instagram and stuff is kind of a crazy thing for the industry because, every deer season, you're going to see multiple people who have been owning a property for 10 or 15 years see success from like shooting a big buck, and it's really easy to just get flooded with your mind of like, why isn't that happening on my property? I want that now,
Well, and the big thing with like the restoration side of it, like you said, like a big buck is like, that's like this instant, like that's wow. But like, it's like hard to get landowners excited about like purple blazing star or like black-eyed Susans or yellow coneflower as it is like a giant white oak, or like seeing like, a 10-point buck on their farm. Like you got to realize that all these things, even if they're small and they're only there for a couple months a year, like they're still important. And like, you got to like be like, hey, this is part of the whole cycle. Like you need to like, like some people like get really excited about rock formations on their property.
It is super cool.
They are cool, like, whatever. But like, and then they see the flowers over here and they're like, all right, they see them that one time when they're driving through their UTV and then they're gone the next time they come through. And they're just like, oh, whatever, it's here and it's gone. But like, they don't realize that had as much of a benefit to that property as the other aspects. Like they just, like, it's hard educating people that there's like more to it than just, a little bit.
Right.
Like then the big things that you see, those little things are as important, if not more important sometimes.
Well, so how did that mindset happen for you where you were kind of really open to seeing those little things and acknowledging kind of what they...
Honestly, you get tired of looking at the big things and then you start looking at the small things.
Okay.
And then you see how rare they are.
Yeah.
And then you realize, then you see them year over year at that certain period of time, and then you get excited to see them again. You know what I mean? And then you start to see like what insects use them, or you might even see where the deer browsed on them in May or whatever, and then you're like, oh, this is like part of the same deer might come there every year because they know there's a bunch of spiderwort over here, and they're just eating the the leaves off of it and eating the flowers, and then they're only there in May or June or whenever that spiderwort is flowering.
Right.
Obviously, they're not getting spiderwort in September because it's to nest. But like, you know what I mean? Then you just start to notice these little like fine details about what's going on in your property. And that's kind of what makes you start like paying attention to like, hey, we need to do more than just like hinge cut and have a bunch of like side cover and it's just like thick and I can't see into it. You know what I mean? Or I have like, we were kind of talking of ripping on switchgrass earlier or whatever, but it's like you walk into the prairie and then all of a sudden you see the forbs in there and you see the little blue stem and just, just different things. And you might see a bunch of deer beds around that clump grass. Right. You're like, oh yeah. Or you're parting around in there and you see like a little whatever covey of quail or a bunch of
or like a pheasant or something. Yeah.
There, and you're like, oh, there's other stuff using this. Or you like just happen in July, you just see just a pile of monarchs coming through there. And like, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, this is cool. But like you don't see that necessarily in November when you're deer hunting. But it's like the other times of the years when you see these other things to like think about, because like you can shed hunt in the spring, you can kill deer in the fall. Yeah. It's like what's going on the rest of the time of the year and like what's using your property. So then that's kind of when you get excited about like what, talking to Bo about like MFL stuff and like, doing timber stand improvement or whatever. It's like, what else is using it? Like you can do a clear cut, like a little patch clear cut. And then you're sitting there And even during deer season, you'll see all these birds that are migrating through, using that area for just that small period of time as they're moving south. And you're like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different ways that you can,
yeah, there's just a lot of different ways that you can look at it where, and it's just like putting on different glasses, you could say. It's just like views that you're going to see this in. But yeah. So you worked with Golden Sands then, and you mostly worked with, like, from a consultant point of view of like working with landowners then on like prairie restoration, or what was kind of the stuff that you were doing with that?
Yeah, pretty much my day-to-day was doing property consultations with people trying to do prairie restoration, oak savanna restoration. Every now and then we dabble into some wetland restoration. A lot of that we'd partner back with Ducks Unlimited, trying to do that wetland stuff, installing wetland scrapes, restoring hydrology to these areas, trying to fix up an area that potentially is re-canary and trying to maybe get it back to that sedge meadow original habitat, stuff like that. So trying to pretty much rely on our partners for that wetland stuff. But yeah, day to day was really trying to strive for that prairie and oak savanna restoration.
What was like, so how would you get in contact with landowners? Would they come to you guys asking about prairie questions and stuff, or? Yeah,
so throughout the year we do little outreach events. I mean, we'd be
like Grassworks.
Grassworks is a great conference.
We didn't know this originally, but I went to the Grassworks conference and I went to a talk you did on grazing prairie. And then we just ran into each other there.
Yeah, that was a cool moment. So conferences just like that. We do natural resources, I did natural resources foundation field trips throughout the year, and that type of stuff, just to kind of showcase the stuff that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing or was doing out there. But mainly landowners would come to us. I'd say they would get in touch with our partners, whether that be Pheasants Forever, NRCS, Ducks Unlimited, Golden Sands, stuff like that. And a big name of the game this day and age is not so much what you know, but who you know. It's turning you over to the right person of like, hey, I can't help you, or this isn't something that we do, but I know somebody that can. Here's their contact. Get a hold of them. And usually that's how we would get fed landowners. And also word of mouth was a big thing. People would just drive by somebody's prairie, they pull in and be like, hey, I want this on my landscape. Who did this? And then they put us in touch, and it's kind of a cool system. It's a little bit older way, not so much that social media platform so much, but more so just like people talking to each other and like, hey, these are the people you need to talk to. Get in touch with them.
That's good. I focus a lot on like community and stuff on the podcast. And I talk a lot about just like neighbor relationships and how important and beneficial that can be. Especially when you're talking about like land management and stuff of, if I plant a prairie and my neighbor's like, oh, what's this? And they start asking me questions, like building that relationship where then maybe they want to go and plant some prairie on their property. And I think that's like super cool. But then also I like the idea of the different conservation, like not-for-profit conservation organizations, like working together on this stuff is also super cool to me. I was talking to a guy who that's pretty much his entire job, and I'm going to have him on the podcast at some point. But his job is basically making those coordinations between those different programs, because it's like you have all this funding going out and all this money going out to tons of different organizations that ultimately most of the time they're kind of trying to do similar stuff. It might not, like Ducks Unlimited is going to focus on ducks, and Pheasants Forever is going to focus on pheasants, but a lot of the projects can be similar, So just trying to get those organizations to kind of like work together and stuff is like, I think, kind of cool. So
I mean, and when we would work with Ducks Unlimited, I had a few ladies sat in the same office as me, and for their grants and stuff that they're working on, they have upland acres, almost more upland acres than they do wetland acres. Just because of like the breeding and the reproduction of these ducks occurs in the upland more so than it does in the wetland. So they want to create the wetland just for the attraction and the hunting side of thing, but also the uplands is just as important in terms of like making sure that these species have a foothold on the landscape, and that that way they have their area for breeding and reproduction and nesting and all that stuff. And so it may seem like a water-based organization in Ducks Unlimited, but they have just as much of an intention pointing at the uplands as they do the wetlands. And same thing with Pheasants Forever. You know, these are all conservation organizations that understand the full ecosystem benefit of making sure that we can hit everything. And usually that's why we would try and pull in these partners, because it's like, hey, I might not be the expert in this. I really know my prairies, but I don't know those wetlands. So we'll pull in the people that do know, so that way we can get, you know, everything achieved that we want to get achieved out here. So
Definitely.
it's really cool.
Cool. So let's talk about Oak Savannah. Yeah.
Yeah, Page Creek is a big one. Marquette County. I mean, probably rattling, like, just in general, not just prairie, but Oak Savannah. Probably 5 to 6, maybe even 7 projects that we got rolling right now. Yep.
No.
Yeah. Glacier Lakes Conservancy there as well.
There you go.
Yeah, so what do we got for projects rolling on right now? We got one for Glacier Lakes Conservancy. That's a big one that we're doing over in Sheboygan. And that's, I think Ducks Unlimited is actually involved in that one a little bit. And that's, how many acres is that? I think that's like 40 or 50 acres of restoration, getting rid of invasives and converting it over to like Oak Savannah. That's a big one. And we're actually working with Dan and Clay from NRE on that one.
Right.
So that was a big one. Like we were just talking about Page Creek. That's one that we're doing. That's been a 3-year project. I think we've restored 100 and some acres.
Wow.
Like it was all like
prairie or Oak Savannah or
so
both?
it started out as like a red pine stand that the Nature Conservancy logged, and then they kind of walked away from it after the logging. And so it's all like red pine and oak regen. And then that had to be 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they did the cutting. And then we've taken it right down to bare bones, down to the soil here. There was a lot of black locust coming in there.
Okay.
And like that, so we did all the clearing and the herbicide work, and then Fish and Wildlife, I think they collected a lot of lupine and did a lot of collections. Kind of wish we had more microphones right now, but like we did a partnership basically, like doing that, because that's all. I think lupine. There's a slender glass lizard up there that they're trying to do habitat work.
Is that a lizard or is that a plant species?
It's a salamander, right?
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So endangered. It's kind of wild. It's been tough working around the restrictions for their time of the year when they're out. So like timing, it's been an issue. But what else do we got going on? I mean, we've had that big job down in Palmyra. That was a Ducks Unlimited job. That's a big WRP that they're doing down there. That was 126 acres. We planted that prairie 2 years ago, and it's looking awesome. But there's a bunch of ragweed coming in there.
Which is technically a prairie species, right?
It is, but it's super aggressive, and it's just like it's all bottom ground, so it's like peat soil, and that ragweed can be so aggressive that it needs to be like managed, otherwise it will just take over.
So how do you manage it then? Just mow it?
Mowing it, just keep mowing it and let the grass take over, because once the grasses show up, they can kind of smother out the seedlings.
Right.
So that's the big thing with that.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of what we got cooking for prairie. I mean, we got a bunch of CRP seedings to do this year.
Do you see like CRP to me means a wide variety of things when it comes to what you're planting? Like it could just be a mix of big blue stem and Indian grass, or it could be like a big prairie mix, you know, right?
Usually they're big prairie mixes.
Okay.
And I use CRP as kind of a vague term for like doing a warm season installation.
Yeah.
Because like in our world, like, I mean, if we're doing a straight switchgrass seeding for someone, I'll be like, yeah, we got to plant switchgrass for this guy. But if we're doing something that involves forbs and warm season grasses, we just call it a CRP. Yeah. Even though technically they might not even be in CRP, but just like in reference for the shop, if I see it say CRP, the boys know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So,
because that's something I see just on social media and listening to podcasts like around whitetail hunting right now, is there's people that are popping up talking about native habitat and restoring native habitat and stuff and the benefits that can have on the deer population. But a lot of times they're not necessarily referencing like, okay, let's look at what was pre-European settlement. What did this landscape look like? That's not what they mean by native habitat. They just mean like incorporating and using native species, you know?
Yep.
And like, so that's why like when people say CRP, I'm like, okay, so is this an actual like prairie mix CRP mix, or is it like a kind of just
and,
like a?
And it's kind of interesting because like, so we've dealt with some biologists where they get like down to the nitty gritty where like you're doing an installation, and I was actually talking to Peter down there in southeastern Wisconsin. So when they like do a seeding, they'll go in and, you know, they might do like a frost seeding where they broadcast everything in, but then they hold back some forbs just because they know, like, based on the topography, what's going to grow better in certain aspects of the soil.
Right.
And they're just going in and sprinkling that seed in those individual spots, trying to like truly restore it to like you said, pre-European, like, you know, trying to get right back to it. But like at the end of the day, from a contractor standpoint, that's just sometimes not economically feasible for us and the landowner. So you mix it all together and you spread it all out. And the seeds that are going to do good in a certain area will do really good in a certain area. And the ones that are going to do good in that other area will do better in that area. So it's kind of like, for us, it's kind of like we're painting with a wide brush. And like some biologists, they're trying to, you know, surgically
really
like
nitpicky
put
about
stuff
it
out there. And it's just like, but yeah.
I mean, what's even the benefit there? It just like saves on price for the seed mix
for us?
Of like being that nitpicky with the seed.
I think it's just getting the seed in the right places because, you know, like, you know what I mean? Let's say you got an area where you got some high, sandy, dry knobs.
Yeah.
And then it goes down into some lower, you know, where the soil composition is a little heavier and richer. And you just know, like, a certain plant's going to grow better up where it's high and dry.
Where it's drier.
So it's more or less like the money you're spending on the seed, you're making sure it's getting put where it needs to technically get put.
Yeah.
But like for us to come out there and like charge you the time to like actually do that, it necessarily doesn't always work. So you like just have a mix and you just kind of put it across the whole thing. And 5-7 years later, you're going to see a bunch of upland stuff over here and a bunch of lowland stuff over here. And it all kind of works out in the end. But like you said, they're just they're making it happen a little faster. So, but like when we talk about worm seasons, getting back to that, like, when I say CRP, like we're doing a bunch of CRP stuff, it might be such a thing as we're just doing a bunch of worm season installations. And it might just be grasses. It might just be like, well, we sell the real world seed there. And like, it might just be like a bedding in a bag where it's like switch, Indian, and big blue. And we're just throwing that out there. Then, you know, you might get some goldenrod and some black-eyed students, some remnants that are in the soil that come up and, you know, mix in with it. But we're just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, and sometimes that's the first step for a landowner is when they see the worm season grasses kind of waving in the fall while they're hunting. Sometimes that gets them excited to put more stuff out there. It's like you can't.
It's baby steps.
Yeah, you can lead them to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, have you ever heard that saying? Like, that's kind of what it is. You got to just give them a taste, and then they start to kind of do their own research and kind of like, you know what I mean, lead into it. But
definitely
not to get on a soapbox, but like what you're saying about like other people, like you see it on the internet all the time talking about native habitat. People are running out of stuff to talk about. And the reality is like the native habitat perspective, there's so much stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
You can only talk about hinge cutting and miscanthus for so long. You know what I mean? Like that's like, you gotta like, in food plots, you can only talk about turnips and soybeans. Eventually you gotta start talking about the good stuff because I mean, people get like 4-year degrees and doctorates and that stuff. So I mean, there's a lot of content that they can be pumping out. So that's all that's happening, which is actually a good thing because it's educating the population on what really should be done because there's been a lot of poor management practices that have been going on for 10 to 15 years in the let's call it the whitetail world or the hunting world. You know what I mean? Like there's been a lot of short-sightedness going on.
Well, and it's kind of just been a learning process for everyone in the industry.
Yep.
You know, I mean, actually, no, I'm not going to drop people's names, but
we don't have to.
There's just certain people that you can watch them as they develop their ideas of they've been posting media for the last 10 years. And you can go back and look at what they were posting back when they started compared to what they're doing now. And you can just watch as they've learned. So I think just as an industry, we're actively learning. And a lot of the newer guys that I'm seeing, like we were talking about Thomas Milsna, Adam Keith is another one over at Land and Legacy, who are starting to preach like the native habitat restoration and like true native habitat restoration. But like you still have people, you know, like WHS, Don Higgins, where it's like they'll use the native species, but they're not necessarily doing it in the same light, in the same manner. You know?
I don't necessarily think it's that they've learned anything. I think it's because, like, if you do hinge cutting or you do switchgrass, it's a fast and instant result. So, like, if you're hiring me to bring more deer on your property, I'm going to do it the quickest and fastest way. Right? Because if I was like, hey, you need to plant a bunch of pollinator and you need to be managing for butterflies to grow a big deer, this is going to be a 10-year process.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, why am I paying you $5,000 to come out here and color on a piece of paper for something that's going to take 10 years? Like, I want to be able to shoot a big buck this fall. That's why I'm paying you. So, like, that's the problem. That's why guys are hinge cutting, and that's why guys are planting, like, what they're doing. Like, but when it comes to the stuff that we're talking about here, and I can pass the mic back off the bow, but like proper timber stand improvement and like forestry practices and all that stuff, like, that's like a lifetime of work. Like, it takes a lifetime to grow a forest. Like, it's not overnight, right? Like, the deer are there no matter what. So, like, if you manage your property properly, like, you're going to have big deer and good habitat and like a very sustainable like habitat the whole way through. Whereas if you do like the instant gratification stuff, like the hinge cutting or just the switchgrass or like just the silly stuff that really long-term isn't good for the property, like, yeah, it's going to yield you some deer up front, but in the back end, you're going to actually, your property is going to be cooked. Like, is what happens. But like, it looks good on paper when, you know what I mean? When you're, quote unquote, every time we talk, we end up bashing these consultants. I'm really sorry to all you guys.
No.
But no, it's true. Like the stuff that we're talking about doing is like long term. Even like treating invasives. We have people come up to us all the time that say buckthorn and honeysuckle, autumn olive, great deer cover. The deer are hiding, and I'm like, yeah, because during gun season, you're trying to shoot at them. They're gonna run into that shit and hide because you're not going in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
like, so,
and yeah, it's once again, it's like, it's back to what we were saying earlier with like grasses. Like, is a deer really going to be able to tell the difference between switchgrass and big blue stem?
Right.
No, absolutely not. Is it going to be able to tell the difference between if I were to have like honeysuckle versus elderberry? Probably not. But it's all the other things that will notice the difference that really should be like pushing you to the edge to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the deer know the difference, but when push comes to shove and they're getting shot at and they're getting pressured, they're going into the thickest, nastiest stuff no matter what. You know what I mean? But like, if you're a deer, if you're hunting your property properly and you're not pressuring your wildlife and like you're able to hunt it in such a fashion that you're not pressuring your animals, they're going to want to stay in the areas where you have good native habitat and there's good native browse. You know what I mean? Like, where they're not having to just bury their butts into a bunch of multiflora rows because they don't want to be in that stuff either. Let's be honest, they really don't. But like, the only reason they go in there is because that's the spot that we don't want to go as people because it's so nasty.
Just too thick. Yeah, it's nasty and thick. Yeah.
So,
no, for sure. And also, you can talk about how honeysuckle, buckthorn don't have like very great browse, like
zero browse.
Like it's just it's not good browse at all. Versus a lot of your natives are, or they produce some kind of mass in some way.
Dogwood, red oyster dogwood. I mean, all those things are great.
Hazelnut, highbush, cranberry, elderberry, like all those things. I get
landowners all the time. They're like, I want to plant hybrid willow in my prairie, and I'm like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like, that makes zero sense. Like, what are you like?
I could understand doing like a highbush cranberry or something like that. And you just have to manage it correctly.
Yeah.
But why would you do hybrid willow or
hybrid poplar? Well, they're fast growing. It's instant gratification.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? These guys are like, I got 15 years left in my life. I want this stuff now.
Right.
I'm like, well, you should have bought a better piece of property.
So, and that can be part of the solution too. But yeah, I think there's a progression I feel like we have as people as well of, you notice a lot when people start to have kids, that's when they develop the long-term mindset because all of a sudden they're like, wait, this isn't just about me. And I can provide something super awesome for my kids in 40, 50 years.
I see it more when they have grandkids.
Yeah.
Like, that's when they're like, I'm doing this for the future. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's when you see it. Like, I'm not going to see this, but I'm leaving it for the future. It's like, when about my age and older. Like, I'm 44, so it seems like about 55 years old is when guys seem to be like, you know what, this is going to be my legacy. We're going to like, turn this around. So,
but no, that's good. That's good. I do have a couple questions for you guys, like actual like building oak savanna and stuff, and how whoever wants to take the mic next can have it.
Well, we'll leave it here for now.
Oh, okay. But I see like two ways of building oak savanna. Number one, like the most labor intensive, is if you have nice big white oaks or bur oaks, like going in and actually clearing through that forest, reducing it to like 50% canopy. And that's like super labor intensive and expensive. I see that as one way. Another way would be to like get prairie established in your fields and then go and actually plant oak trees out there. And that's a way that's much more long term. But in terms of labor and expensiveness, I feel like that's a lot cheaper, you know?
Yeah, it'd be 100% cheaper if you're starting out with a blank slate.
Yeah.
And you could go in there and just put what you need out there for sure. But the thing is like obviously agriculture in Wisconsin is a big thing. So like we've lost a lot of true oak savannas.
Right.
So anymore, it's like basically old pasture where you're seeing like, you know, white oaks and bur oaks. And sometimes they've grown up so thick now that all the lower branches are dead on them. But you can still see what was there 50 years ago. And you're like, you walk through it and you're like, yeah, this used to be an oak savanna.
Yeah.
Great example.
I can see that
though.
on my property.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Up
like
there where you're at, I'm sure there's a lot of that.
I mean, we have on our ridge tops, we have big old white oaks that are probably older than the state of Wisconsin. Yep. And I just recorded an Instagram video. I didn't do a good enough job, so I didn't post it, but explaining like you can see where it's killing off its branches because it used to be in an oak savanna. And a lot of times, how tall are those branches? They're 6 or 8 feet tall. That's their lowest branches. And how tall does prairie get?
Yep.
6 or 8 feet tall, you know?
But no, like a perfect example, like going the other way with what you're saying with planting the prairie and then planting the trees in there. And this is not actually a perfect example. That Page Creek project that we're working on over by Packwaukee. Like that was all at one point, it was all cleared for agriculture. And then they were like, hey, it's too sandy here for agriculture. We're going to plant it into red pines.
Mm-hmm.
And then it obviously went to the TNC and they're like, we hate red pines. So we cut them all off.
Oh, I think you were telling me about this.
Yeah, then they never did anything with it. And it just turned into oaks, more red pines, white pines, and black locusts. And then obviously the Fish and Wildlife guys came in the partners program with TNC. And they're like, you know, this would be great, you know, because there's fields out there that are like solid lupine in the summer. Like it's like literally there's a sea of purple. And they're like, you know, we should just continue this through the whole thing.
Right.
So that's an example of where it gets kind of costly because they've literally like went from where it was bare field, planted it into pine trees, and then they like cut the pine trees down, let it turn into all this early successional regen. And then like we went through now and like forestry mowed it, cut the trees down, sprayed it. And now we're trying to turn it back into what it was before it was field.
Right.
It's like as a society, we can't make up our mind with what we want to do with the property. Like, you know, it's kind of ironic.
No, that's fair. But yeah, I think oak savanna also, you can farm oak savannas, you know, like you can graze in an oak savanna. It's really great pasture actually, especially like if you have prairie established in the understory and stuff.
Yep.
It's like that's where you should be during the summertime grazing, and you're going to get a lot more.
Yep.
I mean, that was your whole talk, but it's just like you're gonna, right. You're gonna get a lot more like warm season like tonnage during that time when you're grazing, but then you also get the shade component of the trees, and then even you can go in there in the fall and let your animals eat acorns and stuff and all that, and that's like kind of and also like you look at when beef cows on a small scale are being slaughtered. A lot of times it's in the fall, so you can get them fat on acorns and you can slaughter them. Like that's kind of a cool gig.
Exactly.
Like you can talk more about like the grazing aspects as to oak savanna and prairie and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you said it right on the head, right? You look at the agricultural side of things, you can still use those areas as your agricultural landscape. You know, a lot of people think when they, you know, traditionally grazing, they want to graze the cool season, the Timothy grass, the orchard grass, reed canary, whatever it may be, just because it has that high tonnage, that high protein content, something quick and easy, grows back really quick. But as you kind of move into that late June, hit that 4th of July period, and even into like mid-August, that's when it gets really hot. You start hitting the dog days of summer, the cool season, notorious for its name, grows great in the cooler parts of the year, goes dormant. those root systems aren't long enough to support that drought period. That's when your warm seasons take off. Those warm seasons really start supporting some grazing pressure. And when you start mixing that in with some of the forbs, Illinois bundleflower, wild lupin, just to name, a couple of them, and there's a whole handful of them that you can have throughout there.
Right.
Those have, anywhere from 11 to 25% crude protein mixed in with them. And, that can really be your holdover period. And these are just quick flash grazing spots that you have, if you have, say, a 60,
you can't really, So Brian's asking about like how you would actually manage grazing in an oak savanna and stuff, right?
Yep.
And yeah, you definitely have to do like a rotational grazing system.
Yep.
And that's typically people are going to get into the rotational grazing mindset before they even touch stuff like prairie and oak savanna restoration. That's just like a natural transition of mindsets in terms of like managing land and how they're going to go about doing that. The only person that I can really speak to is Dr. Patrick Kaiser. And he's down south, more in like the eastern part of the US. But I've interviewed him on the podcast and stuff, and he's written a whole book on grazing like warm season pastures and stuff. So is there research on oak savanna specifically? I don't think so. It'd be interesting but you also, it's hard because Wisconsin has 0.1% of their oak savanna left.
I
or something
I think
like
it's
that.
even less than that. It might be even 0.01%.
Yeah. So, right. How does,
yeah.
And I can say that like prairie is, like you can manage prairie with grazing.
Yeah.
In the same way that you would with fire.
Right.
And that was something that Patrick Kaiser talked to me about. Was he noticed with quail that when they were just burning prairie and that was it was still good quail habitat. But then when they introduced the grazing aspect into it, it became even better quail habitat.
Right.
Yeah. But even like, it's similar to a forest of like, you get different structure within it, within the actual prairie, especially like with how long you manage it for and how long your animals are in there.
Yeah.
So I think you do have to be more particular with prairie, especially with the kinds of species that are in there. Stuff like black-eyed Susan and partridge pea, where it's like more of a biannual species and it's not really like long living, like compass plant, for instance.
Yep.
If you graze it too heavily, you're going to see those species disappear.
Yep.
Versus like compass plant, you're still going to see is going to be in there pretty heavily. So
and a lot of people's big worry when it comes to grazing like oak savannas and prairies is like the milkweed component of everything, right? Because milkweed, is the name of the game of grazing, and it's toxicity to cattle, and obviously it does have a higher toxicity to sheep and stuff like that. So you might want to be a little bit more wary around it when it comes to sheep. But cattle, I mean, we're talking about these rotational grazing systems. People are having them in there for.
I think that's actually the question that I asked you when I was at your.
I think so. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I asked him like the worry behind like toxicity and stuff with prairie and all that.
Yeah. So I mean, when it comes to I'd say it's this transitional thing. If you have them in there from 5 to 7 days, right? Like they don't have enough time to hit the milkweed. They're going to hit the high
in the
stuff
quantities
that they
at
want
least.
to. Right. I would say now if you had, I think my example was at the conference was, if you had 20 acres straight common milkweed, let's not throw cattle on there at all. Like, but like if if there's just scattered around like bits and pieces here and there, like those cattle are gonna like they're selective grazers to some point, and so they're gonna choose the better stuff over that milkweed. And even if they do consume the milkweed, it's not gonna be at a high enough rate to kill them. Sheep might be a little bit different story, kind of have some caution around that, but
this is kind of like my mindset too, because we graze pigs, cows, and sheep on our property and stuff. And this is just the mindset that I've had towards planting prairie and for the purpose of grazing. In terms of toxicity, is it's like I'm not really worried about it with the cows. I am worried about it with the sheep just because it takes a lot less to kill a sheep. Like, our attitude with our sheep is we might just walk out there on the pasture and there might be a couple dead someday.
Right. 100%.
It just happens. Like sheep are delicate animals.
Yeah.
So I think it's I don't worry about it from cows really at all because they're just not going to get the amount that's going to be toxic compared to the rest of their diet. Sheep, I definitely worry about it with.
Yeah.
And I think there research to be done on that would be awesome. I asked Dr. Patrick Kaiser that. I had mentioned like goldenrod too is another one I hear people talk about. Even partridge pea, I've heard can be toxic. I think with partridge pea and goldenrod, it's more of they contain compounds that have been known to be toxic, but the plants themselves haven't actually exhibited being toxic at all.
Right.
So I think it's just like important when you're picking out a mix. Like if you want to take out the milkweed, don't feel bad about it. In my opinion, like it's okay to play it safe. Like
from like a standpoint of like the monarch benefit and everything like this, we got this question a lot when doing restoration. There's milkweed everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Like you look at bean fields, corn fields, hay fields, like it is growing in these ecosystems that have been hit for 20 plus years with glyphosate and 2,4-D and herbicide.
Right.
And it's just growing everywhere. Ditches, roadsides, anywhere you look. Like Wisconsin, everyone's like, oh, what can we do better for the habitat, for monarchs? And it's like, well, we could do restoration out there. But then, when it comes to grazing side of things, it's like, okay, maybe we'll remove some of the milkweed species. And then they get really worried about the monarch butterfly. And it's like, well, it's not really... To be frank and honest with people, it's not what we're doing here in Wisconsin. It's their overwintering grounds down in Mexico. They're losing the loss of habitat down there. Stuff's becoming too warm. The trees are dying, and they have to find like new systems down there. So it's nothing that we're doing up here. I mean, we have it literally everywhere. As Brian said, it's in the name, milkweed.
And,
like it's
and even
a weed out here.
like the times that I planted prairie, I only seeded my first prairie this year, so it's like I've only seen the first year of prairie. But like I see milkweed popping up in it, and I haven't planted it.
It's another one of those hope species.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think there's ways of working around it. So
for sure, take it.
Something to think about, and this one's drove me nuts for years. The DOT has a big push to put pollinators along the road, like flowers and just good habitat, which I love good habitat. Don't get me wrong, but how many vehicles hit bugs when they're driving down the road? I feel like it's the worst spot to put habitat for insects. They don't know enough to fly above the car lines. It's the stupidest thing to talk about, but it's like we're putting food for bugs right next to where they get killed.
I think part of why something like that could make sense is if you look at it from the perspective of it may not necessarily be for the bugs, but if you plant the prairie on the roadside, the people who have no idea what it is might see that and then start asking questions. And then, maybe they go into it. So like, I would see it more of a benefit from like an awareness thing, but also
they could just
I don't care about the roadsides. Then I just want to get farmers to do it. Like people drive by cornfields and pastures all the time, like make those into prairie and stuff and focus on that.
We were just talking about butterfly habitat, and it just made me think of the one day I was driving down the road, and I'm like, they're planting all these flowers along the road, and these insects, they have, you know what I mean, and then we're just smucking them with our cars. I'm like, this makes zero sense. It's like be like me planting soybeans along the road for a landowner, and then they're gonna go hunt it, and my deer keep getting hit by cars. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's funny.
It's not where the habitat belongs.
Yeah.
I'm just being facetious, but like it's true.
No, I think that's.
But one thing we really should talk to here is about Jeffrey. We need to talk to him and what he does here at Ideal Land Management, and like what his role is and how he learned how to forestry mow and some of the crazy shit he's seen through the years.
What's air just to get Jeff some ideas here? What do you find as an operator to the benefits of forestry mowing? A lot of people,
I've heard a lot of negative things people saying online about forestry mowing.
Right. Talking about forestry mowing and deer habitat. I mean, I think Brian said it earlier. People are looking for that side cover, right? With the honeysuckle, the buckthorn. They think it provides great structural side habitat. What do you see in terms of like forestry mowing of like, hey, like this is a quick and easy way. Like you want quick results. We can do this, you let it green up, and it gives you, a quicker advantage to establishing better habitat in that kind of that quick return interval that people are looking for. So
Okay. Yeah.
All right, I gotta say one thing because George over here was talking about all the bad stuff he hears about forestry mowing on the internet.
Well,
and
yeah.
hey, no, you don't have to get insecure
Okay.
because like it's true. There's a lot of bad stuff that goes on, but that's because there's a lot of bad operators out there
Yes.
that they treat it like you're literally running through the woods with a sledgehammer. But if you are a good operator and you can identify plants, and Jeffrey here is really good at it, like you can use a skid loader to manage your property like properly. You really can. Like honestly, like the problem is what we're getting anymore is anybody with a credit score and a pulse can buy a skid loader and they can just go out there and mow down your entire woods. And they're getting rid of oaks, they're getting rid of maples, they're getting rid of everything. And yeah, it looks like a park. They're rototilling it. They're scarifying the soil. They're getting too deep. Like a lot of bad stuff happens with a forestry mower. I 100% agree. Or you get the fly-by-night guys that just do a really shitty job of mowing, and then it's just trash. And then they don't go and do any follow-up resprout spraying, and they don't do anything that takes care of it. So there is a lot of bad that comes along with forestry mowing, unfortunately. But if you hire a company that understands habitat and conservation, there's actually a lot of good that can come from forestry mowing.
I know a pretty good one.
Yeah, there's Ideal Land Manager is probably the best out there. It really is. The rest of them are jokes.
I mean, all jokes aside, yes.
Yeah,
and
no,
Jeffrey
and
is the guy
is.
behind that.
And
so we
Jeff
should
is
let
like, because Jeff rode along with me for 3 years, listening to me complain about other people and the work they did, whether it be like too fast and too like just choppy, or they were just petting the ground and just taking money from landowners. And by petting the ground, I mean they're like mulching it down to dust, and they're mowing like half an acre a day or an acre a day, and it just looks like it looks beautiful. Don't get me wrong, but they're like overcharging for what it was. Because from a conservation or wildlife standpoint, there's a happy medium, right? You got to have it like mulched, but you don't need it to look like dust. Like, and then you got the guys that put the head too far in the ground and they just like rototill the soil, and then you get erosion. You get a bunch of like weeds coming up. There's a lot of bad stuff. Like you want to kind of get in and out and be delicate, leave the good stuff, take the bad stuff. Jeff, take it away.
All right.
Well, he basically just covered the entire works of forestry mowing. Oh my gosh. All right. We back up. The 2019, the end of it, I was milking cows for a family friend. And then just randomly one day, I get a message from this lady, Brian's wife, Melissa. Do you want a job or something like that? I'm like, okay, cool. Ignored it. Don't know you. Long story short, a month later, started working for Brian, and I couldn't tell you the difference between a white oak and a red oak at that point.
Yeah.
No idea. Didn't know what buckthorn was, honeysuckle, none of that stuff. Just dumb farm kid. So I started part-time with him, riding around, listening to complain about other people's work.
I did that for a day. It was really fun.
Yeah, it is. Just riding around. We go to some jobs. I start mowing. He says I'm doing great, which he was clearly lying to me. Like I said, I had no idea what any of this stuff was.
I saw the potential.
He saw the potential somewhere. But yeah, I don't know. Just being in it, I just learned by staring at the stuff all day. Now I know what tree is what invasives are what needs to go, what needs to stay.
Yeah.
What.
Or to what degree that you're gonna actually mow it?
Yes,
you know,
yes.
and like how much you're running.
How
like
much do I got to take out? How much do I got to leave?
Yeah, we had first time I had seen forestry mowing on our property this year for our oak savanna restoration, and it was just really cool watching them just essentially bulldozer a forest. You know, as bad as that sounds, like it was just cool to watch all this honeysuckle. Whereas like the understory was super thick, couldn't walk through it. And watch them kind of just like literally eat away at
disappears.
It, you know? And they were really great. Like we were able to explain to them exactly what we wanted, like what kind of trees to take and whatnot. But it is like up to the operators
100%.
to know, like, you know, when I say don't cut down my hickory trees, they don't cut down the hickory trees.
Like you'll get guys like Brian was saying that they don't know. They just go in there, whatever that mulcher can take down, they'll just take it down.
Yeah.
And you can tiptoe around with that giant machine pretty easily if you know what you're doing. Yeah, go for it.
Not to interrupt Jeff, but when he first started working for me, I had to explain to him, like, every, like, forester, every biologist, every landowner or like even like Bo from Fish and Wildlife, they all expect a different result. Like they all have a different vision for what they want their property. And us as operators, like we got to be able to like meet with whoever it is and be able to understand what they want. Because like we might be dealing with like one of my good friend of mine, Mike Seeger, he retired. He was the forester down the Southern Kettle Moraine. He hated buckthorn. He loved pine trees. And like, I'll never forget, like when me and Jeff, we'd go down there and mow, and like you'd be mowing through there and all of a sudden you'd see like a nice clump of hazelnut or plum. And you'd kind of mow around that and just keep going and be like, you missed a spot. And I'd be like, well, yeah, that's some good wildlife habitat. That's a good species there. He's like, no. He's like, I get rid of that. So like that's like the extreme, right? Because he's growing wood. Like that's what he's interested in is board feet. Like he's interested in timber. He's interested in pine regeneration. That property is for a specific spot. Like that's what he's doing. But then like you might go and work for like Nancy Frost or like when it was Bo and Brendan Woodall when they were at Fish and Wildlife, they desire something completely different.
Yeah.
So then you're like, you know what I mean? You're leaving those species of plants. So you can't have the exact same mindset for everything. And like when Jeff started working for me, he's like, yep, we're mowing stuff down. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Like you got to be able to talk to a landowner and be like, yeah, I want an oak savanna, but I want to leave these hickories here. I want to leave this here. And, you know, I want the hazelnut. He's like, the reality is like, you know, us, we're like, it's all good. We got to leave it. But like some people, you know, they have a different like vision for what it's going to be. Or like if you're managing for like lupine, let's say, you know, and we're like in Central Sands, hazelnut grows like a weed sometimes in some of them properties. I can remember that one that Tom Zolakowski's that we did. Like there was hazelnut coming out your ears, and I love hazelnut. It's one of my favorite shrubs.
I love hazelnuts too. Yeah,
most hazelnut I've ever mowed in my life.
Yeah,
because the goal was for Carter blue butterflies. So like that was the goal for that property, and that as an operator, and I'll pass this back on to Jeff, is like that's where like a good operator understands what the objective is and like what plants need to be left for that objective. And that's where like Jeff is really good. Like that's like one of the things actually we as a company are really good at is understanding what your objective is. Because even like, you know, George, your objective for your property with the regeneration, you know, what you want for plants is going to be completely different than your neighbor.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like we're going to
it's even site to site, you know?
Yeah, site to site. So like we come and work for you and we're talking to you and we're all excited for what you're trying to do. And then your landowner over here, your neighbor is like, yeah, I really want a ton of clover and brome grass. And you like see me over there planting his stuff. And you're like, what the hell, Brian? Like you're just over here planting natives for me. And now you're planting cool seasons here. And I'm like, hey, like, you know, we're trying to pay the bills, but like we also understand that he's doing good in his own way. You know, I mean, so there's a balance, right?
Right.
Like,
there's always balance.
If we all did the same thing, the whole world would be oaks and prairie, and and the reality is they'd be in places it doesn't belong.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, that's the thing is you have to also understand like driftless area, Wisconsin, like that was largely oak savanna, you know, pre-settlement. But as you go over to maybe like the lower part of Michigan, you know, oak savanna could work there, but was it oak savanna?
Right.
You know? And also we may not, as a society, we may not actually truly understand how to determine that to the best of our abilities, but you know. Exactly.
It was. I was saying, if we want to really restore it, we just start putting ice cubes everywhere on the landscape.
Okay. Yeah, but that would work. Just not the driftless.
Yeah, not the driftless part. At least not that. Depends on how far back you go. No, but I just wanted to. I mean, keep putting the hammer on the nail, just in terms of, you know, a good operator and stuff. So I mean, Brian's mentioned it, and I've talked about it working at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. You know, I used to kind of somewhat be in charge of these guys here and getting projects done on the landscape, and you know, working with Ideal Land Management from that standpoint when I was the project manager of them and trying to accomplish these projects. There is a handful of projects just because you get so swamped with work, right? A lot of people coming in trying to do as many good projects as you can across the landscape.
Right.
You know, it'd just be a simple phone call with Brian or Jeff and just be like, hey, like, I think you guys know what we're looking for out here. You guys have done enough with us out here. Like, we're just looking to save the oaks of any size. Like, if you find any white oaks, don't take them. If you find a good cluster of red oaks, leave the best, take the rest type of stuff like that. And the Page Creek project, up there in Packwaukee is a perfect example of it. We didn't have time to get out there and go market ahead of time. So you'll see, if you ever walk the property, you'll see some trees with red marks around them. Those are trees we were trying to keep. And then there's trees that just aren't marked in general. That's just simply because we didn't have time to get to that area, or it was too thick to get to that area before they could forestry mow it out. And so they just went through there and they just simply used, the general knowledge of like, what do they want out here on the landscape? And it was just us putting trust in the contractor to do that type of stuff. And you can't do that with every contractor, right? We just had that conversation of, there's a lot of contractors out there that don't know the difference of oaks and maples and, whatever it may be. And so it was just as easy as putting the trust into them. And we came out there and, it was exactly what we hoped for and stuff like that. So but I'll give it back to the man of the hour, Jeffrey Peterson.
All right. What do you want me to expand on that?
How do you, like, when you're forestry mowing, like, how are you what's going through your mind when you're deciding, keep this, take that?
It just like he was talking. Well, if it's in my way, sometimes it goes. But a lot of people don't know what the inside of a tree looks like. So when you mulch it up, you can never tell what it was. That's great.
Okay.
Sometimes you get in that situation, you don't want to go around stuff. No, but I was just kidding. By the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, it's just trees that Bo has marked through the years that were like, that was a dumb tree.
Yeah, you kind of. Yeah, he's got one vision, and I look at it, and I have a different vision, and sometimes I go my route, not his route. Yeah, I win.
Well, if you're actually doing it, but that makes sense. I'm sorry, Bill. But
when they're marked, there might be a cluster of them, and it's just like there's some invasive in the middle.
You kind of got to go, especially if you're working with topography. I would imagine it's like sometimes you kind of just got to do it.
You got to take the good and just. Yeah, sometimes you got to get rid of the good stuff to get the bad stuff. It is what it is.
It was funny. I was standing by one of the forestry mowers that they have for sale here at the expo, and I was looking at the price tag, and I was like, I could just see some dude sitting here with his wife right next to him, and he's staring at it, and he's just like, I could take out a second mortgage. I could do this.
All the time.
Yeah. Yeah, you can. But you gotta have the knowledge to actually be good at it to last. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just out there smashing wood around and.
There's
one thing to talk about. We're talking about remnant prairie and stuff like that, and pasture.
Yeah.
From a forestry mowing perspective, and Jeff has a lot of knowledge of this. When we're forestry mowing, we find all the old fence lines. You can see where the old pastures were. You can see stuff from 50, 60 years ago that you experienced. Skid loader that like walking through the woods that you necessarily don't ever like see, and Jeff probably can testify to this too. Like especially the Southern Kettle, that was a spot that was bought up and converted really quick into like wildlife areas and like forest.
Oh, you find so many homesteads that have been
on
in those woods, like
fence lines and old foundations.
And there's been a site on Esterly Road. There was like 4 houses on that 20 acres or whatever, and you'd never know if
you ever go digging around for random stuff.
No,
in there?
I gotta keep working. I'm pushed to work.
Okay.
So, you see a lot out of that windshield for sure. That
that's cool.
Wouldn't pay attention to any other time.
We have like an old foundation up on one of our ridge tops, and then along the trail that goes to it, there's like these kind of like half carved into the side of the hill, just like round domes. And I'm like, is this back in the Prohibition or something? Or like, but it's like, it's small. It's like half the size of this table. And it's just like built and then like a dome top. Really? Wow. Because they're tiny. Yeah, right. No, I should do that one of these days. It'd be fun, but also I might find something I didn't want to find in there. So you never know. But yeah, cool. Well, we're at an hour and 15 minutes, so I think that's a pretty good.
As long as a Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah. Well.
I'm more of an operator, not a talker. Maybe maybe next year it'll be better.
Fair. No, I think. Yeah. Oh yeah.
No, I appreciate you having us on the podcast. I mean, for anything that you guys need in general, for anybody listening out there, throw it out there. Ideal Land Management, Reedsburg, Wisconsin, south central part of the state. Travel 2/3 part of the state. And I mean, we're just out here to try and make your guys' goals and dreams come true is pretty much the name and the game of it. And yeah, for anything you guys need, just reach out.
Awesome. Good. Brian, Jeff, you guys said your piece?
I think so. Good.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Please be sure to go and check out our sponsor, Just Landed Lanyards, over on Instagram. They make duck lanyards, dog leashes, binocular slings, gun slings, all that kind of stuff. It's all handmade, really high quality stuff. So please make sure to go and check them out. Follow them on Instagram, message them what you want, and they're going to get you hooked up. Also, just a reminder to please share this with anybody you think would find this interesting. It's pretty much the only way that I'm going to grow is by you guys spreading the word that this podcast exists, as well as comment any questions you have about it or suggestions as to what I should do in the future, even production wise as to how the episodes go. So anything you guys want to comment, please be sure to comment it and I will definitely respond to it. And thank you guys again for listening to this episode.